The party last night was awesome. Looking out at this crowd, it seems that way. Thank you guys so much for making it out at 10 o'clock in the morning for a talk on a Saturday. I imagine you're having as much difficulty as I am staying coherent this early in the morning on the weekend. So I really appreciate you guys coming by as we talk a little bit more about Android Wear. Also like to thank the folks at DroidCon for having me out, and Juan in the back for taking care of the sound and making us sound great. If you guys don't have a plan for the second session, Brian Schultz is going to be talking about developing on the Chromecast as well. So you'll get a tasty twofer of emerging technologies, which will be super fun. But I'm going to talk a little bit about Android Wear. But first, I'd like to tell you guys a little personal story about me. When I was growing up, I grew up in the middle of Kansas, and I was like super poor. And I remember vividly, like still to this day, like viscerally, the day that the first affordable calculator watch came out. It was made by Casio, and by affordable, I mean it was $100. And I wanted this thing so bad in the 3rd grade, I can still feel it today. Now, $100 doesn't sound like a lot, but you know, back in the 80s, and when you're super poor, that $100 might as well have been $1 million. There was absolutely no way I was ever going to be able to afford this thing, and that made me want it that much more. I remember in 3rd grade, I'd be lying awake in the middle of the night, just dreaming of the day that I would have a calculator watch, and I would walk into class, strutting in like a boss, and I'd just look at everyone, and everyone would look at my watch, and they would look at me, and I would look at them, and I'd be like, yo, you need some shit calculated? Let me consult my wrist. I was super stoked on this, and that fascination lasted 20 years. So this summer, when the smartwatch came out, I was over the moon. I was really excited, because finally, I was going to be able to relive this thing that I was deprived of in my childhood. I could finally get a watch, and this watch could do things, and I could afford it. And the things that it could do were absolutely ridiculous. It was like connected to the internet, and it was open for developers like me to hack on it. And I was super excited about that. And the stuff that they said you could do with it was like out of control. Like you could do stuff when you were drinking coffee, you could do stuff when you were riding your bike, you could do stuff when you're, I guess, giving someone a bubble bath. Like there was a ton of radical things that you could do with this watch. And so when it came out, I just need you to know that I was probably the most enthusiastic person out there for it, right? Because after 20 years, I was finally going to be able to live this fantasy of having a watch and just walk into a room and say, hey, you need anything, let me consult my wrist, because the future lives here, right? And then that watch actually came out. And like many of you, I was a little disappointed. The Android Wear devices and the Apple Watch have been lampooned by a lot of folks in the media, and it's largely for good reason, right? The device is larger than we thought it was going to be. The charger is super clunky, and also it has contacts on the back, which are already starting to corrode after 3 months of wearing this thing. The battery life meant you had to carry the charger with you all the time. It will only last a day, if that. It was nowhere close in terms of feature set to what we thought the future of watches was going to be for 50 years, right? In American pop culture, this is what watches are supposed to be. You're supposed to talk into them like somebody important, like a spy, and he was going to give you directions, and that was going to be totally rad. And that is totally not what happened with this particular device. And if you're like me and you grew up in the 80s, like this is not the future that we were promised, right? We were promised jetpacks, yo. Like we were supposed to get some radical stuff that was going to carry us through the air. We were supposed to get hoverboards, and we were supposed to get teleporters, and we were supposed to get holograms, and we kind of have that, but it's on CNN, so it's lame. And we also have like flying cars. Like this was the future that we were promised, right? This amazing archaeological future that was supposed to be laying in front of us, and all we got was a device that looks like it was issued by a correctional facility that does not even have feature parity to a 1950s comic book. But all that said, and that rant aside, I still am very optimistic for this particular platform, and specifically for Android Wear. And I think you guys should be too. It is clear with the first iteration of this hardware that the manufacturers and the platform makers, that is to say LG and Samsung and Apple and Google, are just doing everything they can to make this stuff work, right? And when you take a look at what's in these things, it is no small engineering achievement, right? There's a lot of stuff packed in to this little package on your wrist. You got capacitive touchscreen, you got connectivity, you got a CPU, you got a GPU, 4 gigs of flash memory, you got tons of sensors, you got a microphone. Like, getting all that stuff into a sleek single package is no small feat, and it's clear that's where these folks have been spending all their time. When you take a look at the announcement a few weeks ago for the competing offering for Apple, it's obvious that this stuff is really hard to get right, and these folks are just focused on making this stuff work, not necessarily focused on making it useful. This is one of my favorite pieces of clip art from all the publicity stock photos that Google put out for the LG Watch in particular. The reason why I think this is endemic of the opportunity that we face is because this user is actually still wearing a jawbone while also wearing the watch, thus demonstrating that this is not yet the one device that is everything that you need on your wrist. And that is an extraordinary opportunity for developers, right? Because we got a green field ahead of us with this thing. There are not many times over the course of your career that you get to work on a new form factor. And I think this, in many ways, represents a better opportunity than even tablets. Like, tablets were just really, really large phones. This is a completely new thing, a completely different thing. And we should be super excited about that, because the platform makers aren't the ones who are going to figure this out. If there is a future for smartwatches, or for smartches, that future is going to be written by us. And probably, thanks you guys again for coming. My name is Rob Spector. I work for a company called Twilio, where I serve the developer evangelism team. We're a cloud communications firm based in San Francisco, but I live and work in the greatest city in the world, which is New York. And my gig is pretty sweet, because in my role, I get to play with new technology all the time. And as I relayed with my personal infatuation with the wearable genre of devices, I got to spend a lot of time with Android Wear ever since Google I/O. So I thought I'd take a little bit of time here at DroidCon to give you guys a brief introduction to what that looks like. So the agenda of what we're going to be covering today, unfortunately, doesn't include any live code. I know that was built on the sheet. We weren't able to get the AV stuff in order to do that, but we're still going to see a lot of code. We're still going to take a fairly deep dive into what it's like to develop on Android Wear. We're going to talk about the device itself and specifically cover some of the usability paradigms that you guys are going to be manipulating with your development on Android Wear. We're going to talk about what it's like to develop on the device, go into notifications and develop on apps, and then we'll wrap up with some of the cool stuff that I've been seeing out there in the field for folks who have been building on Android Wear. Does that sound good to you? Okay, we're just a small group this morning, and I know it's really early, so if you just have a question, why don't you go ahead and shout it out. We won't wait until the end. Let's try to make this a bit more of a conversation rather than a lecture. So the device itself, if you haven't seen it yet, it's big. It comes in 2 different form factors. There's a square, which is on my wrist, and I think I saw a few of you with Motos. Corey has one as well, if you want to check that out. The Moto is definitely sleeker, but the form factor and the usability is basically the same. A couple bits that may be surprising if you haven't looked at the platform before. It's definitely not a standalone watch. This thing is married to your handset, and in order for it to have any utility at all, it needs to be an Android handset that's fairly recent. Communicates over Bluetooth with the handset, and that's what provides all the connectivity. The apps on Wear serve as clients for apps on the handset itself. The user interface that you see is going to be very familiar to you if you've ever used Google Glass. And indeed, it appears to be a suggest and demand paradigm that Google is using across its ecosystem right now. So it's all basically notification cards. Again, very familiar if you've ever used Glass or Google Now. The interaction is basically swipe in a single button. You'll get a notification up on the screen, and then you can swipe to take different actions which you register as intents. The primary input device is speech recognition, and as you can imagine, that speech recognition is somewhat limited if you want it to be really functional, because it does have to do a round trip to the handset and then to the cloud and back again, which can be somewhat latent. I will say that LG devices usually require repetition in order to get the thing that you're actually looking for from it. Definitely wouldn't recommend tweeting from the company account from this guy, which is a mistake I definitely made. To our 49,000 followers, which was great marketing, excellent work, Rob. In terms of the mindset for the user, which I think is important for developers, the device, I have to say, is still not essential. Whenever I'm in a hurry to get out of the house, in fact, I did it today. I was actually in the cab on the way here, and I realized for my Android Wear talk, I had forgotten my Android Wear device. It's something that is super easy to forget, and as such, when you're developing your app, I think you need to be cognizant of that. It also drains the device. Yesterday, as an experiment, I came into the show with a fully charged Nexus 5, and it was gone by about 3 o'clock. And I charged twice for 2 different talks. The default settings on the LG Watch means the watch will actually outlast the handset. You can get about 13 hours with this guy before it completely dies. And recharge time takes about 2 hours. In terms of the ecosystem, there are a lot of apps that support the wearables, and I think you'll find primarily because it's so easy to add notifications to them, which we'll be going into in a bit. The ecosystem is definitely growing. Most of the useful stuff on the platform so far are relaying around tickets and remote controls and fitness. I have some links in this presentation up on GitHub to some apps that are pretty dope. I think the only time anyone has actually been demonstrably impressed with me using this device was with the Delta app, where you can get your ticket and walk up to the TSA counter and flip your wrist and flip it over, which was impressive the first 2 times I did it, and then no times after that. The social stigma around voice input is super unexpected. People after Glass are visibly hostile to spending a lot of time speaking into the app, which is something you should bear in mind when you're building out your interaction model. But enough of the yakking, let's get to the hack and let's talk about what it's like to actually develop on this thing. So like I mentioned before, the app itself is a client of a client. So it is something that is bundled with your Android app as a Gradle dependency. The app serves as the hub between the internet and your wearable app. It provides all the connectivity, it provides all the persistence, and you can sync a lot of different types of objects through the data layer, which is available with the SDK. You can sync objects, mostly data maps are useful for that, and you have listeners, which we'll go into in a bit, assets like images and other kind of binary blobs, messages as well. But in addition to that kind of connectivity and the notifications piece, you basically have 2 integration options. The first one, which most people are going for right now, are the notifications. You basically get those for free with Notification Compat. We'll be going into a few of those options a little bit later. Or you can develop an app directly for the device to leverage some of the sensors that are on it. So if you want to do any sort of speech input, or take a look at the gyro, or the magnetometer, or any of the fitness monitors, you will need to build an app for the device itself. So a little bit of sour news on that score. You will have to switch to Android Studio in order to develop basically anything on it, which is a total drag. You can get some development working by using the Bluetooth debugger in Eclipse, but if you want an Android virtual device, they are forcing you onto the IDE in order to take advantage of that. A few of the constraints that you'll be working with. Presenter notes are totally backed up. Go gigantic GIF of WebKit. few of the constraints. So a lot of the API is not available on the devices you could expect, and probably the biggest one that will affect most developers in this room is the fact that you don't get any WebKit. So all the presentation layer is handled through Android layouts or views. There are also some other constraints that you should be aware of, most particularly around sleep. So when the device is inactive, it will go to sleep. That'll jerk the user completely out of your app. When they open up the device again, it's just going to be a list of notification cards. As a matter of fact, in the design guidelines, the Android Wear team does recommend using notifications only for any sort of persistence on the device. And you'll see this with a whole bunch of the fitness apps. Like instead of like opening a fitness app and then getting like your graph, they'll instead have a notification card that shows you your steps, and then you can enter the app using the notification card as your entry point. Go ahead, Seth.
Do they have a way to keep the device awake?
Do they have a way to keep the device awake? No, it's that's totally out of your control. You get a hard sleep, and depending on the user inputted settings, I think it's like 5 seconds or something like that by default. Cool. Any other questions on the constraints?
So no WebView, you can't use a web.
No WebView at all. So you get absolutely no WebKit. Now I will say the notifications are pretty constrained and pretty easy to build on, and they have a couple different styles that you can work with, which we can go over here in a bit. So getting started, again, if you want to do any serious development on the Wear, you will have to make the switch to Android Studio, which is not great. And you also need to update to Rev 20 of the V4 support library that was released back in July. So that version of the support library includes everything that you will need in order to get started developing on the wearables. But in addition to that, I think it's a highly recommended upgrade anyway, because there are some serious improvements to the performance of the swipe refresh layout. So if you've had users that were complaining, especially left-handed users that were complaining about your swipe refresh layouts, you get those for free with this upgrade. The second bit of sour news is that if you want to do anything with the data layer, you will have to include the entirety of Play services in order to make that work. So your DEX counts are about to go up pretty substantially with that support. So 2 bits. We got the native Android, for lack of a better term, native Wear apps, and then we have the notifications. For the most part, most of the folks in this room can get some pretty serious functionality out of the Wear device just by doing notifications alone. And again, the way that it works is similar to the way regular notifications work, right? So you get a card, it has a primary intent, and you can swipe for additional intents if you want to add additional actions to the notification as you're building it. The interface itself is pretty much single button, especially in the notifications. So you get one icon, one drawable that shows up. You can press it or you can dismiss it with a swipe. You'll see a lot of very basic actions with other apps in the ecosystem right now. So there will be some stars, some likes, some archives, some dismisses, some deletes. In the case of Twitter, you can even do a reply and speak into the device to retweet. Again, don't recommend it, but that is available with a proper integration point. And implementation is very familiar to anyone that uses Notification Compat. So if you're already using Notification Compat, you get basically access to the wearable for free, which is a pretty neat jam. If you take a look at this, code. It works super simply. Create your intent, grab a builder for the notification, add that intent, and then use the notification manager to go ahead and notify. The way that you add additional actions, that is to say, add additional screens when you're swiping left on an individual notification, is just by using the add action method. And you can do a lot of stuff, a lot of the advanced stuff that you can do now, just grabbing default intent action feeds. Here's an example of doing that with geolocation. And as you can see, it's pretty simple. But the part that you guys will probably want to use is the customization for wearable devices themselves. So there's a new class called the Wearable Extender, which you can use to extend your builder object and include intents that are just for wearable devices. And using it is pretty simple. Just an add action method that you extend using the Wearable Extender here at the bottom instead of adding it directly to the notification itself. Any questions on notifications? Cool, super simple, you get them for free, but most people are super stoked on the apps and getting started with building for it. So a couple bits on getting started. The only way that you can get an AVD of a wearable device is with Android Studio. The emulator, I will say, is still pretty damn buggy, so really most of your development is going to be occurring directly on the application using debugging over Bluetooth. Now, the emulator is good for checking layout though, and will give you square faces and round faces. But again, a lot of this stuff you can fire and forget because you're constrained by the interface that Notification Compact gives you. So there's not a whole lot of alignment that you necessarily have to do. And if you're just using drawables, the iconography is already decided for you. But again, I can't stress enough, the emulator definitely crashes quite a bit, and Android Studio will take a dirt nap if you fiddle with it too much. There is, for actual in-app layouts, a unofficial support library that will provide you a whole bunch of stuff for creating the wearable app experience itself. It is unofficial in the sense that it's still very much in flux. It is, obviously a dependency that is in the root Android tree, specifically in the support library. But I think what they are trying to communicate, or what the Android Wear team is trying to communicate by saying it's unofficial, is that the thing breaks all the time. Which it definitely does. It's already broken 3 times since Google I/O. There's a lot of stuff in there though. You get a box insert layout, which is kind of the default layout for anything that you're doing on the device. And there's some activities and views in there that you can leverage and extend to build your actual interface. Definitely still in a state of flux, but a great place to start if you're looking to build your interface. However, what most people will want to build an app directly on the device for is to get the speech input, right? And that's available through 2 basic avenues. So one, you can register, or rather declare an intent on a number of the system default voice actions that occur on the watch. So this is very similar to declaring an intent for like the share function in the Android system. This is definitely the most useful part overall of developing on Android Wear. So you can declare intents on the system. In this particular case, it's take a note. There are plenty of others though. There's about 20 that you can choose from that include like take a car, or start a workout, or start a run that you can pop up so the user can make use of your app when they take those actions. And there's the opportunity as well to grab some additional voice input. Sorry, jacked up again. Yeah. So this is how the speech recognizer basically works. The way it operates is very similar to a callback. So this will take care. Well, not very similar to a callback. It is a callback. You create a recognizer intent and then provide it a method for it to exact when it gets the response back. And this will take care of all the communication with the handset for you. So every time you do a speech recognition, it's actually it's being inputted on the device, but it's being recognized on the handset. So the handset will go ahead and try to recognize it itself. If that is unavailable in its cache, it will go up to the cloud to do it as well. And that whole round trip is taken care of for you. So really, all you have to do is create the intent and create the callback in order to leverage the freeform voice input. Finally, for packaging, the app itself is distributed inside a handset app. And this is another part of the growing Android team push to get folks to standardize on a single dependency management system and a single IDE. So in this case, you definitely have to use Gradle, and you have to include that as a dependency in your handset device. So where users can't find apps on the watch, they can't install apps on their watch. That's an important bit for distribution. That all occurs on the handset itself. And in order for it to get to the Play Store, the project definitely has to be declared as a dependency for the handset bit itself. In terms of signing, both the Google Wear app and the handset app have to be signed. They can be signed with different keys, and you can use a build options config in order to accomplish that. But the packaging overall is super simple if you're already using Gradle. So data layer, this is how you get communication directly from the handset device to the wearable itself. And you have 3 options that are available to you with the data layer API. So this is full sync, and it's pretty black box, meaning that you don't have to deal with reconnection or disconnects. It'll also handle all the sync for you as well. You don't have to write any of your own sync code. And it works for 3 types. First is a data item. So this will usually be your data maps, so any of the key value stores that you need to shuffle in between the handset and the app itself. You can also get messages, so you can pass messages to the device, you can pass messages from the device. This is useful for any sort of RPC that you want to do on the handset, or for pushing up new events that occur in the use case of like a fitness app or some sort of sensor input. All the disconnects and sync, again, are handled through the data layer, and they are accessible. These events are accessible both to the handset and to the wearable itself through event listeners. The way that looks is there's a wearable data API that you can use on the handset to push a new, or rather change a bit of data to the wearable device itself. So if you have a data map and you make an adjustment either to a key or a value, it will event to the wearable itself. This is an example of the data map. On the Wear, you just create a listener for what you're looking for. In this particular case, it's on data change, and that's all available through a class called Wearable Listener Service. There are 4 basic events that you can listen for. You have on data changed, so that's if anything changes in the data map, or on message received in the case of passaging messages back and forth. Then you get disconnect and connect as well. This is an example. This is the same slide again. The one bit I want to point out is that the listener itself is pretty extensible. This is not the correct code example, but there are a number of different features that are available for you and actions that you can take based upon the connectivity between the Wear device and the handset itself. So definitely check that out if you hadn't had the opportunity already. So it's kind of the data layer model. Are there any questions about that? Cool. Perfect. So we're coming up on time. Let's go ahead and wrap up with a few conclusions. So the device is not there yet. And I think if you talk to the developers that have worked on both the Android platform and on the Apple Watch platform, they will be the first to agree that just getting this stuff out the door has been the priority so far. Ultimately, the device itself, usefulness is going to be dependent upon what we in the developer community do. And fortunately, there's some examples out there already of some pretty rad apps that are coming out. One that I use personally because I travel all the time is an expense tracker app, which is a really good example of a use case that you can use on the go for your wrist. So, and this stuff can export out into Expensify, which my company uses at least, which is pretty dope. Best place to find the hacks right now that are really promising is XDA. That seems to be where a lot of the Android Wear developers are congregating. Second to that, I would recommend joining the Google Plus community, as there are folks posting their hacks to it as well. One of the best open source apps is called CameraWare. So this will actually give a video update of what's going on with your phone's camera at the same time. And this is available on GitHub, which will be included into my talk's outline at the end of the presentation. So there's some cool stuff happening. And developing on it is actually pretty easy. And if you want to take the plunge past notifications, I think this particular device is one of the most interesting places a mobile developer can be working right now. But I'm still waiting on my jetpack. Also, you can find the notes up here, and we have about 10 minutes if you guys have any additional questions. Thanks so much for having me out. Ray.
I think you had a slide on this, and I just want to make sure I understood it. If I already have an Android Studio project set up right now, and I want to add a wearable project, I have to put something in the Gradle file that says, like, I have a new project in this folder.
Yeah, that's totally
right.
right.
Folder where my new project goes, and that's the Gradle stuff, and that's the wearable stuff.
Right, and in your handset app, the Wear app will show up embedded in your in the handset Android project. So you can develop the wearable project completely on its own, have its completely on source control, and if you so choose, it's completely different key signature if your build system is configured that way. But you do have to include it as a dependency in the handset app in order to get it into the store. And so when you open the handset app, you will actually be able to navigate to the wearable app as a submonitor. So.
If you do use different signing keys, is there any sort of like data transfer issues or permissions or anything like that that you have to deal with?
I haven't negotiated that myself. As I understand, you have to be very clear in your build process where each goes. And when you put up the APKs, they're basically not going to be able to do any sort of real interaction with each other except the data layer. Haven't tried it myself. It does seem like it's a little painful to do, from what I can gather. At least there are a ton of Stack Overflow questions on it, so that says to me that it's probably difficult to navigate, but it is possible.
How do the layouts work between square faces and round faces? Like, does it scale the square face down to fit into the round face, or does it need cropping? And can you provide like alternate layouts?
Yeah, it totally doesn't scale. It just chops off the corners, which is super fun. And why I think there's so much work going on with the unofficial support library right now to provide you with a ton of tools so you don't have to deal with that brain damage yourself. If you're introducing your own drawables, the clear guidelines are to make it round and make it in the center of the screen. This is a particular problem for folks who use the very first version of the Delta app. So folks who had the Moto with the Delta app, it cut off like a corner of the QR code that needed to be scanned when you went in. It's been fixed since, but it's totally a drag.
Back to packaging, where the Android Wear app is a dependency of the handset app.
Mm-hmm.
So if I was aiming to create a Wear app that was, just for Wear and not really for handset, would I still need like some kind of shell handset?
Yeah, you totally need to create a shell project in order to distribute it.
Okay.
It's a total bummer. Court?
Related to the question about circle moving around, if you take a screenshot of the circle watch, it's actually a square.
Oh, awesome. That's really great.
You seem to dislike Android Studio. Why is that?
I've just been using Eclipse for years. So my Eclipse rig is just super, super well tuned. And so that's kind of me being a grumpy old Irish guy. I think like many developers, my initial experience when the beta came out was not great. I will say through the month and a half of research in development for this talk, the experience has gotten a lot better. And if you saw the talk yesterday on using Android Studio, it's actually very good. There's some cool stuff in there that can make you super productive. It's obvious though that the Android, I think it's an important trend for Android developers to be aware of, because it's clear Google's starting to draw a line in the sand now. And as near as I can tell, this is one of the first places where they said, yeah, you're going to use our IDE or you're going to take a walk. Any other questions? Awesome, guys. Thanks so much for coming out. If you would like to get a mustache, you should come and see me after the event, because I wrote a cool app with Twilio that I would love to show you if you guys have some time. But up next is going to be Brian. He's going to be talking a little bit about the Chromecast. Thanks a lot, y'all.